So some trends. And the first trend I want to talk about in machine vision is really one of my personal favorite ones right now. And it is dealing with visual spectrums. Typically, in machine vision, we do all of our analysis on the normal wavelength spectrum, right? The type of viewing that we see through our eyes every single day. But utilizing different types of sensors and different wavelengths, we can actually achieve all sorts of new ways to do machine vision. And I'm going to talk about 3 cases today, and I'm going to really go into deep a little bit about shortwave infrared. But the first one is ultraviolet. So ultraviolet, we all know, not as just a bad movie from the early 2000s, but what we see from the sun, right? But that can also be utilized as a way to see different bruises, for instance, on fruit that we could not see through a normal light. So as we look here, we can see some of these pears have different texture and different bruising on them than what we can see normally. The next one here is infrared. So infrared is probably the most common use of a visual spectrum that we see in today. This is very popularized by trail cams, right? If you're a hunter or if you like doing hiking, you might set up trail cams that can see in infrared. The best way to describe infrared, I'm going to do another pop culture reference here, is one of my personal favorite movies from the 80s, Predator, right? When he's looking through the forest, he's seeing an infrared, seeing heat signatures off of objects. That way we can tell what's going on. Used in machine vision, this can be extremely useful when looking at boards on an assembly line, because we could see what parts of the board have certain levels of heat applied to them that might not be appropriate for that assembly. And then lastly is shortwave infrared. And shortwave infrared, we're actually going to go into a little bit more depth here, but what we really want to talk about is how shortwave infrared sees through a different way than what everything else does. And I have some examples to show just how this works. So the first one here, we have a very common agricultural application of rice sorting. And with a standard visual spectrum camera, we would be looking at this, and you can kind of start to determine that maybe some of this rice is a slightly different color, right? Why is that kernel of rice darker than the rest? I don't quite tell, and it's hard for machine vision and cameras to detect things that are very close together in color. When we want to do machine vision, we want to have contrast. The more contrast we have, the easier it is to do our tasks. Utilizing shortwave infrared, we can actually see in this image to the right here that we have resin mixed in with the rice. So those lightly colored kernels that we see here are actually resin. In doing this, we can help to sort out particulates and unwanted product inside of our food. This goes back to, right, we're helping to make the world a little bit better by creating more ways to keep people safe. The next one here is a very simple explanation of how we can use shortwave infrared to see not just the fill level of a bottle, but also if that bottle is leaking. So if we have a pharmaceutical company that is developing, let's say, a stomach medicine or something, right? We could say that if you wanted to inspect to make sure that all those bottles are the exact same level, no matter what the outside of the container is, we can use shortwave infrared to see that liquid level and also detect if there's any problem. On the image on the left, we can kind of see the droplets of water or alcohol, sorry, with our human eye, but a camera is not going to really be able to detect that. Utilizing shortwave infrared, we can clearly see, hey, this bottle is leaking. This is a bad bottle. Get it off the assembly line. And my final example here of shortwave infrared, which is I think one of the cooler ones here, is this is the same rooftop in Japan over by our Omron Sentech factory. And this is an image taken side by side utilizing a standard visual spectrum camera and a shortwave infrared camera. And one of the things that we can do with shortwave infrared is we can remove particulates and haze from images in order to see the environment clearer. So what this means in laboratory automation and life sciences is we can use shortwave infrared to kind of clear out all the haze from any sort of images we're getting. So if we're looking at cells, for instance, that we want to have a better, clearer contrast on, we can use shortwave infrared to get rid of any of the extra that we don't need.